Howdy, my fellow gamers, and welcome to episode 40 of Storytime with Freak as we continue to plow towards the end of Neil Shusterman's Thunderhead. Without further ado, let's just jump right on in. When I assumed stewardship of the Earth and established a peaceful world government, there were some difficult choices that had to be made. For the collective mental health of humanity, I chose to remove traditional seats of government from the list of viable destinations. Places like the American District of Columbia. I did not destroy that once distinguished city, for that would have been a vile, heartless thing to do. Instead, I merely allowed it to diminish on its own through a policy of benign neglect. Historically, fallen civilizations left behind ruins that vanished into the landscape only to be rediscovered thousands of years later, becoming almost mystical in nature. But what happens to the institutions and edifices of a civilization that doesn't fall, but evolves beyond its own embarrassment? Those buildings and the obsolete ideas they stood for must lose their power if evolution is to succeed. Therefore, Washington, Moscow, Beijing, and all other places that were such powerful symbols of the Mortal Age government have been treated by me with indifference, as if they no longer matter to the world. Yes, I still observe them and am available to any and all who need me in those places, but I don't do anything more than is necessary to sustain life. Rest assured, it will not always be this way. I have detailed blueprints and images of what these venerable places looked like before their decline. My timetable for full restoration begins in 73 years, which, I have determined, is when their historical significance will outweigh their symbolic importance in the eyes of humankind. But until then, the museums have been relocated, the roads and infrastructure are in disrepair, the parks and greenbelts have become wilderness. All this to drive home the simple fact that human government, whether it be dictatorship, monarchy, or government of the people, by the people, for the people, had to perish from the earth. The Thunderhead. Chapter 40. Knowledge is POW. While Scythe, Anastasia, and Kiri spent their day touring Endura, 2,000 miles northwest, Manira and Scythe Faraday crossed a street riddled with potholes and invaded by weeds to a building that was once the largest, most comprehensive library in the world. The building was slowly crumbling, and the volunteers who ran it could not keep up with the repairs. All of its 38 million volumes had been scanned into the Thunderhead over 200 years ago, back when the Cloud was still growing, and only minimally aware. By the time it became the Thunderhead, everything in the Library of Congress held was already part of its memory. But since those scans were administered by humans, they were subject to human error, as well as human tampering. That was what Manira and Faraday were counting on. Like the Library of Alexandria, there were a grand entry vestibule, where they were met by Parvin Marquendois, the current and possibly last librarian of Congress. Faraday let Manira do all the speaking and stood back on the off chance that he might be recognized. He was not well known here, but Marquendois could have been more worldly than the typical East American. "Hello," Manira said. "Thank you for making the time to see us, Mr. Marquendois. I'm Manira Atrushi, and this is Professor Herring of the Israbian universe." "Welcome," said Marquendois, double-locking the large entry door behind them. "Forgive the state of things. Between roof leaks and the occasional raids by street unsavories, we're not the library we once were. Did any of them harass you on your way here? The unsavories, I mean." "They kept their distance," Manira said. "Good," said Marquendois. "This city attracts unsavories, you know. They come because they don't think it's lawless here. Well, they're wrong. We have laws just like anywhere else. It's just that the Thunderhead doesn't spend much time enforcing them. We don't have an authority interface office here. Can you believe it? Oh, but we have plenty of revival centers, believe you me, because people turn up deadish around here left and right." Manira tried to get a word in edgewise, but he steamrolled right over. "Why, just last month I was struck in the head by a stone, falling into the old Smithsonian castle. Went deadish, and I lost nearly 20 hours of memory because the Thunderhead hadn't backed me up since the day before. It's even remiss about that. I keep complaining to it, and says it hears me, but sympathizes, but does anything change? No!" She would have asked the man why he stayed if he so disliked it here, but she knew the answer. He stayed because his greatest joy in life was to complain. In that way, he wasn't all that different from the unsavories outside. It almost made her laugh, because even by letting the city limp on the edge of the ruin, the Thunderhead was providing an environment that certain people needed. "And," continued Marquendois, "don't get me started on the quality of the food in this city." "We're looking for maps," Manira interjected, which successfully derailed him from his rant. "Maps? The Thunderhead is full of maps. Why would you come all the way up here for a map?" Finally, Faraday spoke, realizing that Marquendois was so wrapped up in his own misfortunes he wouldn't notice a dead Scythe if he came up and gleaned him. "We believe there are some technical inconsistencies. We intend to research the original volumes and prepare an academic paper on them." "Well, if there's any inconsistencies, they're not our fault," Marquendois said, taking the defensive. "Any error in uploading would have occurred over 200 years ago, and I'm afraid we no longer maintain any original volumes." "Wait," said Manira. "The one place left in the world that would have hard copies from the Mortal Age. And you don't?" Mark Noir gestured to the walls. Look around you. Do you see any actual books? Any hard copies of historical merit have been dispersed to safer places, and the rest were deemed a fire hazard. As Manira looked around and glanced down an adjacent hallway, she realized that indeed, the shelves were completely empty. If you don't have any actual books, then what is this place even for? Asked Manira. He puffed up, taking an indignant posture. We preserve the idea. Manira would have continued to give him a piece of her mind, but Faraday stopped her. We're looking for the books that have been misplaced, he said. That caught the librarian by surprise. I don't know what you're talking about. I believe you do. He then took a closer look at Faraday. Who did you say you were again? Redmond Herring, Ph.D., Associate Professor of Archaeological Cartography in the Arabian University. You look familiar. Perhaps you've seen one of my orations on Middle Eastern land disputes of the late Mortal Age. Yes, that must be it. Mark Noir looked around in the vestibule for vague paranoia before he spoke again. If the misplaced books exist, and I'm not saying that they do, word of them must not leave this place. They would be scavenged by private collectors and burned by unsavories. We understand completely the need to be infinitely discreet, said Faraday with such reassurance in his voice that Mark Noir was satisfied. All right, then. Follow me. Then he led them beneath the archway where the words knowledge is POW were carved in granite. The stone containing the letters ER had long since crumbled to dust. At the bottom of a stairway at the end of the hall, and at the bottom of an even older stairway, was a rusty door. Mark Noir grabbed one of the two flashlights that were perched on the ledge and pushed on the door, which was resisting his weight with every fiber of its being. Finally, it creaked open into what first looked like some sort of catacomb. But there were no bodies hanging on the wall. It was just a dark cinder-block tunnel that disappeared into deeper darkness. The Cannon Tunnel, explained Mark Noir. This part of the city has tunnels going every which way. They were used by lawmakers and their staff, I suppose to get around unseen by the murderous mobs of the Mortal Age. Manira took the second flashlight and shone it around. The sides of the tunnel were lined with stacks of books. It's only a fraction of the original collection, of course, Mark Noir said. They serve no practical purpose anymore, since they're all available to the public digitally. But there's something grounding when you hold a book in your hands. Very true. That was once held by mortal humans. I suppose that's why we've kept them. He handed his flashlight to Faraday. I hope you find what you're looking for, he said. Mind the rats. Then he left them, pulling the obstinate door closed behind them. They were quick to discover that the books in the cannon tunnel were stacked in no particular order. It was like a collection of all the misshaveled books in the world. If I'm right, said Faraday, the founding scythes introduced a worm into the cloud just as it was evolving into the Thunderhead. A worm that would systematically delete anything in its memory related to the Pacific blind spot, including maps. A bookworm, quipped Manira. Yes, agreed Faraday, but not the kind that can chew through actual books. A few hundred feet down the tunnel, they came to a door with a placard that read, Architect of the Capital, Carpentry Shop. They opened the door to reveal a massive space filled with desks and old woodworking equipment, all piled with thousands upon thousands of books. Faraday sighed. It looks like we might be here for a while. And that is the end of episode 40 of Thunderhead. Thank you all for tuning into this episode. Feel free to leave a like, comment, subscribe, share the channel, share the series if you're enjoying it. We're getting ready for the Toll coming out this September. We're going to try to get one more book in between the end of this and the start of the Toll. Probably something short, kids book, Magic Tree House, something. Just something for Storytime with Freak to continue. Today's daily topic will be... what are we going to talk about? What's your favorite drink? And it could be alcoholic, it could be non. I love water. Water's great. If I'm having a drink, beer-wise, I love Stella Artois. Liquor-wise, I'm a bourbon, scotch, and whiskey guy. What about you guys? Let me know in the comments below, and as always, I will see you in the next episode. Stay freaky.